Thank you so much for your patience. And here we go again. Hello, Joe. Alexandra, is it okay? Perfect. And I guess, okay, that's great, finally. You're on mute, Alexandra, still, I guess. Hey, Christian. Hello, Edgar. Welcome. This is the cheers from Alexandra.
It took like she half an hour to 40 minutes, but eventually we made it, guys. It's an
We made
achievement.
it. Yes. Okay. Alexandra, I would like to just introduce Alexandra quickly. Alexandra is on a personal level one of the people that she's just amazing inside out. She's the founder and CEO of Persed, a learning experience design enterprise, nurturing the 21st century skills and the mindset transformation for talent development. Alexandra is also an international speaker. She's a consultant, she's an author, and she's the recipient of Alain Decaux Literary Prize. She has been recognized as MENA Leadership Academy Fellow for the year 2016-2017. She's a young global changer for the year 2017 and 2021. She's an unleashed global talent for the year 2018 and an UNESCO Youth Leader in 2019. She explores the breadth and the depth of multidisciplinarity. She puts connections at the service of innovation and self-actualization to reinvent the ways in which we think, we learn, we work, and we live. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Wow, thank you for the fancy intro, Sarah, and thank you all of you who are here with us today. Thank you for bearing with us the technical difficulties that sometimes we have to struggle with. At least we have this platform to be able to communicate together and do the things that we want to do, spread the knowledge, the inspiration, the power, the motivation, everything that needs to be done. Despite the odds and despite the fact that sometimes we have pandemics that prevent us from meeting in one location. So, Sarah, do you think we can start the session, the workshop? How do you want us to, what do you want us to do, basically?
We had a very good number of registrants. So would you like to give it one more minute?
Let's wait. As long as you have your coffee and I have my coffee, I have no problem.
Great. So we will wait. We'll give it just one more minute, and then we can kick this session off because we're very excited about it.
I hope you are too. Or what we can do is, while we're waiting for more people to join in, Anna, I prepared a couple of riddles for you. I don't like to start a session with a lot of serious academic kind of, the usual stuff. And it's important to kind of stretch your mind, exercise your neurons before starting. So instead of doing one riddle with everybody, we can start with one riddle, and during that time, other people would be joining in. What do you think, Sarah?
Sounds amazing.
Okay,
let's do it.
طيب حكوا راسكم هلا. By the way, is everybody from Lebanon? So if I mix sometimes a few words of Arabic, would you understand? Okay, cool. Cool. So riddle it is. Aha. What can you see? Can you see a page on which there's guess the word with 1, 2, 3, and 4 as numbers? I can see yes and yes, but I'm not sure for which question it was because of the net lag. In any case, I'm going to read it out loud to see if some of you would have an answer for that. If you have an answer for either 1, 2, or 3, or 4, Kamena, you can feel free to share it. You don't have to figure out the entire word. So basically, a riddle is you have to guess, in this case, you have to guess one word. And in order to guess that one word, you have to guess the components of that word. The components can be one letter or two letters. It could be a syllable. It could be a group of letters, and so on and so forth. So in this case, you have to guess the one word that starts with 1. My first is a short burst of electromagnetic energy. 2, my second is an interjection. 3, my third refers to emergency. And 4, my fourth is the beginning, very beginning of education.
That's a good one.
This is a webinar format. I will be expecting your replies in the chat. Again, you don't have to figure out the entire word. You can kind of collaborate on this and help each other. There's not going to be a winner. ما حدا رح يبقى غسال الشافي بيت قهوة and so on and so forth. So you can collaborate freely on this. If you think you might have a hint on what 1, 2, 3, or 4 is, feel free to share in the chat, and I will be waiting for your responses as we all wait for more people to join us in the room. What do you mean by electromagnetic energy? Well, if I tell you what I mean by it, I'm going to tell you the answer, so I cannot explain it. Pulse. Nope, there is no pulse here. There is no pulse here. EMP, yes, yes, yes. Shant, you guessed it, EMP for electromagnetic energy. So the word starts with EMP. Now you're left with 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4. Emergency is emergency SOS. No, it's not SOS. But close. Not SOS, but close. So EMP for the short burst of electromagnetic energy. Then we have my second is an interjection. My third refers to emergency. And my fourth is the beginning of education. So you guessed 1, which is EMP, and you're left with 3. What are the other 3 group of letters? Let's call them groups of letters. Listen, you don't have to lose. There's nothing to lose by throwing things, throwing syllables, throwing letters, and throwing kind of words here and there. 4 is curiosity. Well, I agree with you that education starts with curiosity and a love of learning and a love of discovering. But in this very particular instance of the riddle, it is not curiosity. 4, no, it's not KG, although it makes sense from the academic institutional perspective that we start education with KG. But in this very particular instance, it's not KG. Books are absolutely important. They're the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's the main course and the entrée and the dessert. It's everything. But in this particular instance, it's not books. It's much simpler than this. It's actually quite literal in a sense. Yes, Duna, you started it. Chris, absolutely. It's ED. So the number 4 is ED. So we start with EMP and we finish it with ED. For the need to extend your knowledge, we absolutely, yes. And again, in theory, but in this very particular instance, it's ED at the end. So now we're left with 2 and 3. The interjection and the emergency. What do you think these 2 might be? The interjection and the emergency. Distress. Well, if you're in distress, where would you go? Okay, we have someone who figured it out. Dr. Nabil, sorry, I cannot see the family name. I'm gonna try Abdun and Sahar Hayek. Yes, you are correct. It's empowered. So EMP for short burst of electromagnetic energy. The second is an interjection, which is O. The third is ER for emergency. And the fourth is ED for the beginning of education. Nicely done. Nicely done. Very well. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. Sarah, I'm waiting for your green light to let me know if and when we can move forward.
I think we can start. That was a great start, actually. You made us all think, Alexandra. So I think we are good to go now.
Okay, so we're gonna have just one riddle, which is just fine. We can do one at the end as though we have the time as well. It could just for the fun of it. And the reason why, it's not the reason, but it's one of the reasons why I think it's important to start with something that is refreshing is that we're tired of thinking linearly, and we're tired of thinking from A to B to C to D, because this is how we were supposed to think for the past 10, 20, 100, 200, 500, 1000 years. It's important to disrupt thought processes, to see things from a different perspective, like the beginning of education. We think of the beginning of education as, well, the start of it, the birth of it, kindergarten. We think of, okay, what's the first thing that we need to embrace when it comes to education? We think of curiosity. But in matter of fact, we can shift perspectives and see it from a different angle. And we realize that actually the beginning of education is ED. And when it comes to design thinking, it's all about shifting perspectives. It's all about trying to see things from a different point of view and try to connect ideas together, try to bring together different viewpoints in order to make sense of what it is we are trying to solve. And thinking. So thinking is at the core of it. And the second dimension is design. Design not in the sense of I'm going to redesign my room or I'm going to do graphic design, I'm going to post it online. Design is a process of creation. And in that sense, design thinking is thinking, a thought process, an approach, a methodology that allows you to create. Create what? Create solutions to problems that we face in our day-to-day life, problems that other people face, problems in our community, in our country, in the world. And we're lucky enough that we have enough problems to, in our bank, we have a bank of problems. So we have a lot of them, and we can pick any type of problem that we want in order to solve it. So that is a quick intro to design thinking. I'll be, of course, digging deeper into what it is, how it came to being, and the components. Now, usually what happens with design thinking is that it's an actual workshop. We're in one room together, so it's not in a webinar format, which allows us to kind of manage these breakout rooms and actually do hands-on exercises. That might be a bit difficult to manage in this case, but I will be giving you some time to think about things to do exercises by yourself instead of doing them in groups. So kind of adapting the design thinking. So I'm design thinking my way into the design thinking workshop. I don't know if it makes sense to you. It does to me, at least in my head. So design thinking. Have you ever heard of the words design thinking together before? I would love to hear from you in the chat to see if you have had an encounter, and if you have encountered design thinking before, where was it? What context? Was it a course at university? Was it you were reading something online? You took a workshop. Oh, not bad. HEC Paris. What are you doing here, Chant? Come and teach the class. No, it's not. You're not teaching, and it's not a class. Let's forget about this. So yes, HEC Paris. Anyone did something related to design thinking with HPID school, Stanford, and the one in Potsdam? They're really doing some great work. If you haven't encountered design thinking, I strongly recommend that you look for IDEO, IDEO, which comes from idea, IDEU. They have some really good tools and an explanation about design thinking. So this is for you to go kind of the extra mile. But today we're going to have a quick intro. That's why it's called Design Thinking One-on-One, because we're just starting things out. And I'm going to share my screen in order to dig deep into that. Okay, so I want to make sure that you can actually see. Thank you, Dr. Nabil. Thank you for the link. So can you see, by the way, the presentation? There's big design thinking 101 in blue with a bit of excellent, perfect. Yes. If you're ready to start, and I think by now you are, let's move forward. Okay, so this is a big hello from Creepy Face. So Creepy Face says, hi, if you wish to connect, feel free to connect via LinkedIn, and feel free to check the work that Perset does. For the moment being, design thinking. Design thinking was created as a way, as a strategy, as a method to solve problems. Because it's not enough to sit on a chair and have a paper and just think of all the problems that we have and then burn the paper. It's fun, it's nice, it's enjoyable, but it's not enough. We need strategies, we need ways that would allow us to solve the problems that we face in order to make sense of the world, in order to improve the world that we live in, even if it's just this tiny world that is our bubble, basically. The process. A bit of historical background to kind of tell you what design thinking is. Design thinking is not recent, so it's not something that came into being like 5 years or 10 years ago. Design thinking goes far beyond that as a concept actually exists. And the first people to have talked about design thinking, or to have really connected design as a science with thinking as a process, were people from the 60s and the 80s. So around that time, we had the start of this, okay, there's something that we can play with when it comes to science and complex problems. So how can we experience problem solving in a very different way, in a way that is simple, that can be replicated, that anyone can use? Not just a group of people, elite, who write policies, I don't know where, and the policies actually take 10 and 20 and 30 years sometimes to come into shape. So it's very practical, it's very hands-on, it's very simple, and it's also very scientific because there's a methodology to it. But if we want to be a bit picky about when exactly it started, we'd say that it's around the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. This is where design thinking really started to become an actual movement, with, at its core, IDEO and HPID school. The first one being in Stanford and the second one being in Potsdam. And after those two, there were countless of institutions that started emerging and that started communicating more and more information about design thinking, about the importance of design thinking, and how it can help engineers, computer scientists, entrepreneurs, problem solvers, random individuals, anyone, people at companies, to really solve the problems that companies, communities, individuals, people are suffering from. And in more recent years, so since the late 2000s, so the late first decade of the late part of the first decade of the third millennium, and starting 2010, we started seeing design thinking almost everywhere, and which is a good thing because we have a tool now, and this tool would allow us to solve the problems we face in a way that is conducive to something that is practical. We have something practical at the end that we can work with, and two, which is conducive to collaborative thinking. Because one of the most beautiful and magical elements, which unfortunately we're not going to experience today, but I hope you will get enough knowledge now to implement that later. So that very magical component is called, drum rolls, without drum rolls, imagine there are drum rolls. It's called collective wisdom or collective intelligence, because design thinking allows you to work in teams, to build upon each other's ideas and thought processes in order to reach a higher level of solutions, a better solution, a more advanced solution that takes into account, that integrates the different perspectives and thoughts and opinions, this is the real magical part of design thinking. Now, the second element that I really want you to kind of understand when it comes to design thinking is that there are three very important elements. The first thing is that it has to be feasible. And this is the practical side of things. You don't do design thinking to come up with a huge project that it will take 150 years to implement and around 20 to 25 institutions from 10 countries to make it work. You start small. You start with something that is feasible, that is practical, that you can do right now. And if not right now, that you can do tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, the day after it. So feasibility, it has to be feasible, it has to be practical. It also has to be viable. So it's not a project that you do once and that's it. خلاص, عملنا design thinking and we're done. But we close the chapter and that's it. It has to be viable, it has to be sustainable, it has to stretch through time. It has to make sense for the people and it has to be implemented constantly, not just once. And that's the difference between, for instance, a project that is implemented by an NGO for one time and that helps one community in one location, and an idea that can support many communities in many locations over time. And this is what design thinking contributes towards. And last but not least is desirability, because you can come up with the most brilliant solution, the best solution in the world. But if it's too complex or too boring or whatever it is, but that is negative, it's not going to be desirable. And people would not want to adopt that solution. And if a solution is not adopted, then it's no longer a solution. It's just something that happened, an idea that popped into somebody's head that made sense for 5 minutes or 3 minutes and a half, and that's that. So design thinking integrates all these three elements in the output, in the product, in the prototype. We're gonna see that word later on, that is being created. So I hope it makes sense. It's a bit abstract here, but we're gonna get a bit more hands-on in a bit. So what can you see on the screen? Verbs, right? What do these verbs mean? What is empathize? What is define? What is ideate? What is prototype? What is test? What do you think these words mean? If you have thoughts, if you have ideas, if you have impressions, like first impressions, especially if you have encountered, if you're just encountering design thinking for the first time, then let me know, what is the first reaction that you have when you read those words? Roadmap of design thinking, absolutely, from start to finish and then beyond, but I will explain the beyond afterwards. Steps, yes. And this is why it's a methodology, because, well, we finished step 1. We now know that there is step 2 and step 3. This is the scientific part of design thinking. We're not just sitting down and brainstorming and coming up with all those ideas, and then we have a huge chart with all those ideas on it, that nothing comes to life. So this is not the case. It's very scientific, step-by-step process. Yes, Joe. What else? If you kind of zoom in on the words, on the verbs, what kind of impression do you have? What do you understand from the words empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test? Do you have any kind of impression, feeling, reaction? Would you like to define those verbs? Feel free to share in the chat. I want to make it as kind of conversational as possible, given the context. Cognitive verbs. Is empathize cognitive? I'd say empathize is more emotional. It can be. It's a cognitive process. We're thinking about it, but empathize requires something else. Empathize requires feelings, because it's empathy. It's emotional. Understanding a problem, but more than a problem, it's understanding the people who are suffering from the problem, because the problem is always lived by someone. There is no problem that exists in thin air. It's irrespective and outside the framework of human life. all reside in the cerebrum. So Joe, are you a neuroscientist? Is test in the cerebrum? Or prototype, for instance? Do we prototype in the cerebrum? Or in the cerebellum? Or in the cortex? We prototype something in real life. So I like the cognitive aspect of things because, and thank you, Joe, for sharing the cognitive aspect, because this is thinking. So design thinking has a huge cognitive aspect because we're thinking through ideas, solutions, problems, situations, ways to make this solution work and function in real life. But there's another layer to it that is not just typically and uniquely cognitive. There's an emotional layer. And this is where problem solving has a second layer of magic, other than the collective intelligence, is that in order to solve a problem that we don't have, but that another community suffers from, we need to feel with the community. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people living in that community, of the people suffering from that condition, of the individuals who are facing these kind of challenges and issues and problems. So there's an emotional layer to it. And then there's a third layer to it, which we have with prototype and test, which is the physical. So it's not, it happens in the mind, but it doesn't stay in the mind. It then happens in real life. We take Lego pieces and we try to build something, to prototype something, to actually see it, how it works, how it functions. Or we create a web page, a Facebook page, to kind of make sense of how people would interact with that idea. And then we move on to creating an actual website. So it's actually happening in the real physical world. And this is the element of design. We're not just thinking, we're design thinking, and that's different. Strategic and practical processes, yes, they are strategic, they are practical. Practical because they exist in the external world. Strategic because it's a step-by-step process that goes from problem to solution. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing all your thoughts, because I think this is adding a lot of value to design thinking actually, but also to the ways in which we explain and represent design thinking with a three-layered approach that is cognitive, yes, but also emotional and physical. And then as an echo for the first thing that I said, the magic of collective intelligence, which is social, because design thinking ideally happens in teams. So you and a couple of other people, you know that X is suffering from a problem. X doesn't want to be next to Y in the alphabet. So you take X, you empathize with X, and you try to understand how X is feeling and why X doesn't want to be next to Y. And you start understanding, uncovering the problems, and then you find a solution. You ideate, you come up with an idea, you test it, you see if it works. Okay, what if we put X at the beginning of the alphabet and we move X away from Y? So we have X, A, B, C, D, and Y, Z without the X. Would that work? Would that function? Or would that completely disrupt the idea of an alphabet? Or perhaps there's another solution that we can adopt. Perhaps it is creating bridges between X and Y and try to help them to deal with their interpersonal issues. That was a random example, by the way. So empathize is about emotion, is about connecting with a problem, connecting with the individuals, the communities suffering from the problem. Define is about understanding what it is that is problematic. Because if we're going to come up with a solution, because, oh my God, this is an amazing idea, I love it. But hey, what problem does it solve? Well, it doesn't really solve a problem. It's just there. Yeah, at some point there are a group of people, there's a startup, I forgot its name, that designed a machine that allows you to take these juices that are in kind of, not in boxes, but in kind of pouches, in order to kind of remove them from the pouch. It doesn't make sense, because if you open the pouch and you just pour it into the cup and that's it, you don't need a machine to kind of pour pour the liquid from the pouch to the cup. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, the idea is fantastic because the machine can be sexy, the idea could be fun, but what's the use? It has no use. It's not solving a problem because there is no problem. So understanding, defining the problem is important. And then we have the place where we start to come up with ideas. And there are a few tips and tricks that I would be sharing with you when we dig deeper into that part. And then there's a prototype, because if we don't have a prototype, we have nothing to test. If we have nothing to test, we don't know if the idea works or not. So the prototype is essential because it allows us to understand whether or not this idea that we have is desirable, is viable, and is feasible, like we have seen here. And the test. The test is to take feedback. One of the problems with the old way of managing projects is that you start the project on day 1, you finish it on year 10, and then you realize, we did a huge mistake with the project. We have to destroy everything and come back from scratch. Imagine spending 10 years working on a project. You eventually realize that there's actually something wrong with this. So design thinking avoids that kind of issues by allowing you to test things very regularly. And the other component of design thinking and the other use of design thinking is that through these cycles, because this is not something that you're going to do once, you're going to repeat that. Because once you test, you will realize that there's a tiny problem. What is this problem? Perhaps it's because the idea is not that creative and attractive. Whoop, I go and fix the idea. Perhaps the idea is attractive, but we're not addressing the right problem. So we go and see how we can address the problem, the right problem, the problem that we want to solve. And perhaps the problem is correct, but there's something missing. People from this community that we're trying to help are not responsive, perhaps because we did not understand their point of view. And so we have to come back to empathy and try to understand the people we want to help and support in order to redefine the problem, in order to come up with ideas and then test the second wave of ideas. So that's how it works ideally. It allows you to have these iterative processes. Okay. What we're going to do now is that we're going to have a tiny kind of personal experience by yourself, given the structure of the webinar. And in this exercise, I want you to think of one community, one person, one individual, one could be someone from your close circle, could be someone from the country, could be a type, like, I don't know, entrepreneurs in Lebanon suffering from the economic crisis. It could be farmers who are struggling to sell their produce. It could be university students who are struggling to find a job. So whoever it is that you want to help, you are going to walk a mile in their shoes. You're going to imagine that tomorrow morning, you're not going to wake up as yourself. You're not going to wake up as Joe and Donna and Dana and Shant and Imad. You're going to wake up as another person. This person that you're trying to help and support. And as you imagine yourself in their shoes, try to think about how they're spending their day, what they're doing, what are they doing first, what are they doing second, what are they doing third, what are they thinking, what are they feeling, what are they struggling with. If the struggle is with finding jobs, then how are they searching for jobs? Where are they going? How are they doing, managing that search, and so on and so forth. So if you may, I will be giving you exactly 6 minutes, and I will be putting some music so that you would have 6 musical minutes in order to think about all of that and walk a mile in the shoes of the individuals, the community that you want to help and support. Does it make sense to you? If you have questions, please do ask the questions before I put on the music and we start the party. I mean, we start the exercise. I'm waiting for your input. via the chat to make sure that all is good and that we can move forward with the exercise, that it's not too weird or distant or esoteric or whatever. All is good, all is good. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to give you 6 minutes. And during those 6 minutes, you're going to think about this community. You're going, okay, can you repeat the question? Because of bad connection. Obviously bad connection. Anyways, so I'm going to repeat it again. The exercise that you're going to have to do now is you're going to have 6 minutes. And during those 6 minutes, you're going to imagine yourself in waking up tomorrow morning, not as yourself, not as you, Donna. You're going to wake up as a person who is a member of a community that you want to help and support. Students, teachers, farmers, entrepreneurs, investors, whoever that is. You're going to imagine yourself as this one person who's not you, and you're going to imagine yourself going through their day and through their struggle. What are they seeing? What are they feeling? What are they thinking? What are they doing? How are they trying to solve the problem without actually being able to do that? What kind of frustration do they feel? What are they facing on a day-to-day basis as a struggle? So that is going to be the first exercise that you're going to do. Donna, is it cool? Did you get all the ideas, the thoughts? Was the connection good enough? Is it understood? Do you want me to repeat? Or anyone else? If you need me to repeat, I have no problem. I can repeat it a third time. If not, all good? I just need a quick confirmation to make sure that everything is good and that we can move forward. All good, perfect. So I'm going to give you exactly 6 minutes. And the timer is here, so 6 minutes. And the 6 minutes start now. Let's go.
You know, people sometimes ask me.
And obviously, before the music starts, we have an ad. And so I have to wait for the ad to finish before we actually start the music. Now you have your music. A bit of jazz for your creativity and thoughts. Not me, I assure you, the disruption is not for me. half. Sorry to interrupt this enjoyable jazzy feel, but we have some work to do. Okay, so who feels like sharing? By the way, you can share in the chat if that's comfortable for you, or you can raise your hand, and then once you're given the right to speak, and you will be able to unmute yourself and share it with us live. And to be honest, I really strongly prefer that you share it with us live than chatting, because it will be taking a lot of time if it's via chat. So who feels like sharing their own discoveries, their own experiences, how they wandered in the shoes of someone else? Okay, we have a huge from an unknown person. So hello, unknown person. Students in Lebanon. Online hybrid obstacles, bad internet access to the materials, long electricity cut, high generator prices, find a job, stability, salary, surviving. So all of these are issues that they're thinking about and suffering from. For their future, family, wealth, financial stability. It's a lot in one day. Medical care as well, immigration, should we leave, should we stay, and so on and so forth. Conclusion, there's frustration, there's a sense of hopelessness. They feel deceived. Okay, from Joe Shahood. Okay, thank you, because for some reason the name disappeared. It happens. So, okay, this is a lot to unravel. Joe, do you feel like sharing a bit more about how you kind of put yourself in the shoes of a university student? Perhaps you do not have to put yourself in the shoes of university students, because you are. But would you like to share with us, like live, the thought processes and how you thought about all of this?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, thanks, first of all. Actually, I'm not a student anymore, but it was I believe a tough question, because we have in Lebanon right now we have so many people to put ourselves in their shoes. I mean, it's becoming a reality for everyone. So we have the entrepreneurs, the students, teachers, every sector is suffering. And so perhaps as students, I chose the students because they are the future generation, which I look forward and I count on them to move the country and lead to a better Lebanon.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, I try to see and gather all the things that I see and I hear from friends. And like I said, we are all in this together, and we have so many things that we share between different sectors.
What do you mean by so many things that we share between different sectors?
So I mean, so many obstacles and
Yeah.
And problems, daily problems that we face every day.
Yeah. And in many cases, the experiences, the problem with hybrid work and hybrid education, the fact that there's bad connection, the fact that there's sometimes not even electricity, and if there is the generator, and the generator prices are 20 to 25 times higher than the electricity, the public electricity. The fact that there is this constant instability, yes, absolutely, it's not something that is typically an issue that university students are facing at the present moment in Lebanon. And this is to say how much they have to take in terms of problems and issues, because 3/4 of these things they aren't even supposed to think about.
Correct. You're absolutely right, Alexandra, because unfortunately in Lebanon, we are thinking in too much things that should be given for granted
Correct.
for every people. And this will, I believe, this prevent us from dreaming and from realizing our dreams and move forward and enhance and improve. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. Joe, thank you so much for sharing. There's something also in particular that you've said, and that is very important, is the emphasis on the frustration that they were feeling. And this is something that you finished with after the list. So the list is quite cognitive, but at the end you shared the feeling of hopelessness, the hopelessness and helplessness, this feeling of frustration, the feeling that they have been deceived by the current model, the current situation. And by really tapping into how they're feeling and how they're perceiving things and what they are looking for. So they're looking for immigration, but at the same time, they're thinking of family. So there might be some kind of a gap between what they want to do and what they want to achieve, and what they're also looking forward to do and achieve in another area of life. So there are these internal contradictions that also contribute to this sense of hopelessness and helplessness as well amongst the students. And it is possible to see through this kind of exploration of what they have been through, of what they're going through, a lot of different problems, which is going to be very helpful for the next step. Joe, do you want to add something in that regard with regard to the answer that you've shared with us in the chat?
I think that would be enough for now, I believe.
Okay, perfect. Joe, thank you so much for sharing. Shant, you said, I also thought about the school students of Lebanon. Nice subject, to be honest, it is a nice subject. Shant, would you like to explain more about your thought process and how you empathized with the school students in Lebanon? Also, feel free to join in and kind of express your thoughts and ideas. Shant, to you.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, hi.
Hi.
How is everybody doing? Hope everyone is great. So how my thought process was like, I wrote everything down. So it was like waking up as a student, you feel heavy from yesterday. You are actually like feeling very heavy. Like I considered myself to be at the end of my education. So it's like I'm a baccalaureate student. So I'm like struggling to know where to go, because I never had real life experience in school. I never saw. I'm struggling with choices. Like I imagined myself struggling with choices and feeling no satisfaction at all from the education I'm getting. So like I have no accomplishments except for actually learning the stuff that I get. I thought of my heavy bags that that I'm carrying every day to school. I was thinking about being bored in class because it's always theory, and I I was also thinking that I will never use some of the stuff that was taught. Also, I felt zero motivation. I'm done talking about myself. I'm just like
yes. And I'm playing along as well.
Exactly. That's why. So I thought about having great friends. It was amazing. Like, it's amazing to have great friends at school and enjoying that. How would I say it? That environment, but also being upset getting judged on grades, which don't reflect my real potential. Like, I I I don't know how to say, but it's like getting judged constantly by teachers, and based on grades, based on my memory, and not based on critical thinking. I also felt tired, uh, and coming back home and having a lot of homework to do and a lot of preparations to do, uh, feeling of routine that I will wake up tomorrow again and do the same stuff that I did the day before. Then I thought about, like, yes, summer is finally here. So I thought about taking taking off, like, for the summer, relaxing sort for the summer and not doing anything because of the routine I did all along the year. And then I thought about, like, let me acquire skills, like let me learn something, but didn't know where to go, what to do. And uh, like, I also contemplated about, like, how is it to work in a certain major. And then at the end it was like, okay, I'll continue what my dad is already doing.
Wow, that is a very, very beautiful journey. Thank you so much for sharing. I understand why you would be going back home in the new shoes that you're wearing today, tired, because tomorrow is a Saturday. So if you're going to school on a Saturday and then you expect that the following day on a Sunday you're going to school, you're absolutely correct. Like, it's already happening from Monday to Friday and Saturday and Sunday.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's too much. That's too much. I believe that you're also considering things pre-pandemic with the backpack, because obviously now the backpack is just sitting in the corner of the house doing nothing.
Exactly. I personally believe that, like, we're gonna go back to normal. Like, I personally hate this this thing happening right now. It's not like me, because, like, I'm very extroverted, so I like going out, actually.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But the exercise that you've done is absolutely magnificent, because it actually walks us through the journey. And as you were talking, my head was buzzing with ideas like, yes, this is an excellent problem. If we dig a bit deeper, we might find something else that we can work with. So the way you said it and the way you actually really lived in the shoes of someone for an entire day, accompanying them throughout their day, through their emotions, step by step, really well done in that regard. And it sheds a lot of light on the things that are happening inside the mind of this young 17-year-old high schooler who's about to start something entirely different in their life, but they're not sure what it's going to be yet. So all the sense of confusion, of tightness, of interest also, and curiosity about all the different things that are available, but in the same time, the sense of boredom that comes with the traditional learning systems. So all of these things, they are going to be conducive to the definition of the problem, and then to the ideation phase. So Sean, is there anything else that you want to add to that list of emotions and ideas and thoughts?
Actually not, but no. As I went through, I thought about problems that could be solved in the process. I actually applied one of them when like I finished my school, went to university. So we came back to the school that I went, and we offered them, like, we talked with certain companies, and we gave like baccalaureate students a 1 week, an additional 1 week on the school year, so that they go and walk through uh, for 1 day in a skilled worker's job to see what's it like to work in this field. So like a student would go 1 day to a teller, sit next to a teller in a bank. Next day he would go do a job of a plumber, help the skilled worker and shadow him. So we did apply that, and it was awesome, to be honest. So uh, that's my input for now. So
yeah, no, thank you for sharing that as well. You might come up now with a new idea that you could potentially implement with your old school or any other school for that matter. Fingers crossed for you.
exactly. Thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so this is the first step. So the first step is empathize. You really have to feel with the person whom you're trying to serve, who you're trying to help, and so on and so forth, because that is the beginning of everything else. Once you really understand what the person is thinking and feeling, and so on and so forth, you can dig deeper into the problem. And then once you design a solution, you know you're going to come up with a solution that is aligned with this person's interests, the things that give them hope or pleasure, like friends, for instance. Shant, you were talking about friends, and so on and so forth. So the second step in this process is called define. So earlier we were talking about empathize, so how we can kind of understand the different perspectives. And now we're going to define the problem. We're going to try to understand what it is that these individuals, this community, is actually deeply, strongly suffering from. Now, the temptation usually is to try to solve too many problems at once, but it's very important to focus on one thing and to kind of narrow down, because you don't want to solve problems on the surface. You want to solve the problem on in the core. It's like when you go to the doctor and the doctor is merely prescribing medicines that would alleviate symptoms without ever asking questions on why are these symptoms appearing? What lies beneath the surface? What is the actual deep problem? If the doctor doesn't do that, then he or she is putting your life at risk. And obviously, the problem is not going to solve itself, especially if it's a critical problem. And this is why it's important for you not to solve the external part of the problem. Like, you have to scratch beneath the surface and try to understand what's happening at the core. And one very simple exercise that I recommend that you do, I will be giving you 5 minutes to do that, 1 minute per why, which is to ask yourself why. If, let's say, we have university students struggling to find a job, why? Why are they struggling? Because XYZ. Okay, why is XYZ a problem? Because ABC. Okay, why is ABC a problem? Well, that is because alpha, beta, gamma. And why is alpha, beta, gamma a problem? Because 1, 2, 3. And by asking these series of why questions, by paying attention not to repeat yourself, like you're digging deeper, you're not repeating the first why, you're trying to understand the why behind the why, the motive behind the motive, trying to dig into the root cause of the problem. So the challenge that you're going to have now with all the thoughts and emotions and problems and experiences that you have been through by walking a day in the shoes of this individual that you're going to help, now you're going to take one problem that you think is an interesting one and scratch beneath the surface and ask 5 whys and then answer each one of those whys. Does it make sense to you? If it does, please do let me know in the chat. If it doesn't, also, please do let me know in the chat so that I can repeat. If there has been an internet connection problem and we want me to repeat, I'd also be delighted to repeat. So just let me know in the chat. And in the meantime, I will be preparing the timer. So you have 5 minutes to ask 5 whys. You have 1 minute per why. And trust me, the last why is going to take more than 1 minute. So the first why is going to be easy because it comes naturally to you. But the deeper you dig into the whys, the deeper, stronger, the more complex, the more important the problem. And this is how you're going to end up with the root cause of the problem. So are you ready? Are you ready? Who's ready? Who's not ready? Are you ready? I need to see one yes to feel encouraged. I need to feel it. Yes, thank you, with the double exclamation mark. Thank you, Sahar. Thank you. So, yeah, 5 minutes. The time has just started. And the music is back. we are done. Ready or not? Comes the next step. And the next steps is, what are your whys? Or more specifically, what is your fifth why and how did you get there? So who feels like sharing? Again, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So I'm waiting for your input in the chat to see who feels like adding a bit of value to the conversation. I'm waiting for your inputs. I'm waiting for your whys, for your thoughts, for your thinking processes. I'm waiting. I'm stalling. I'm just putting random words together, hoping that someone will show up in the chat box. Maybe, perhaps. Okay, Joe again. Joe is on fire. It's actually difficult for me to find 5 whys and answer them without turning the whole into political debate. Okay, yeah, I think so too. It would be interesting to turn it into political debate because we definitely need a change in the scene. But yeah, perhaps we definitely need like 24 hours to go through that. Am I the only one who's reaching to an endpoint where the government is involved? Okay, so it's very important to break down the complexity into smaller elements because design thinking is not about solving the big problem, which is corruption in the government and lack of resources and the fact that there's a huge level of incompetence, because obviously incompetence in the government and corruption over the past 30 years in the government is not going to be solved in a fortnight through design thinking by prototyping something with Lego pieces. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this way. I would have loved it if it worked this way, would have fixed things in the country 10 years ago. But it just doesn't work this way. So it's important to understand the root cause at the level of the community and individual you are working with. Why? Because if you want to solve a problem for them, then they are most probably going to be the ones who are going to be interested in the solution, i.e. either buying it or i.e. physically, financially, or buying it emotionally and wanting to join you on this journey and actually adopt the solution in their day-to-day life. So it's very important to pay attention to how far we are going away from the initial problem and how close we actually are to the core problem, the core issue in relation to the issue itself, not to something else. Because obviously, if everything is political at the end of the day, and wherever we are and however we start, eventually we can trickle it down to what's happening at the political level. If we're talking about healthcare, if we're talking about education, if we're talking about the economy, if we're talking about finance, if we're talking about law, and so on and so forth. But by doing this, we're actually walking away from design thinking, because design thinking is thinking with a purpose of design, is thinking with a purpose of making something practical that eventually solves the problem for that particular community. If we end up wanting to redesign the government, then that is fine. But this is something that is a bit trickier and that requires not design thinking, but systems thinking. So it's important. Design thinking is a brilliant tool, but it's not a tool that can solve any and every single problem that we have. Some problems are a bit more complex that require a combination of different types of thinking. And this is a discussion that I had earlier this morning with a mastermind, with a friend of mine who's based in Germany. And there's this space between spaces where you have lateral divergent thinking, creative thinking, you have systems thinking, and you have design thinking, because each has its own advantage. The advantage of design thinking is that it ends up with a practical, viable, feasible, and attractive solution. So if you ended up with a why that is too far away from the initial issue, from the initial problem, this means that you're solving actually another problem. You're not solving this particular one. and that you're not serving this particular community, you're actually serving another community, because another community you're going to work with another community. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that it makes sense to you as much and as well as it makes sense to me. If it doesn't, please do let me know. We can challenge these thoughts and discuss them. But in any case, so the 5 whys, there's this one risk of ending up still at the surface. And in terms of how to practically use the whys, is that you have to dig deeper within it. So for instance, students are bored in classroom. Why are they bored? Because the content of the session itself is not attractive enough. Okay, why is the content of the session itself not attractive enough? Because the teacher is not explaining things through experience, but by simply sharing abstract thoughts and ideas. Why is this the case? Because the teacher, when they had this, because the teacher don't know how to do it. So they don't know how to make their sessions more creative, more engaging. Then the solution would be to help the teachers create engaging sessions. Does it make more sense now? So instead of saying yes at the end, because the government is not funding the schools, and this is something that is far too big and far too complex, and that has far too many stakeholders in it to be addressed by design thinking, we actually address the final why, which is the fact that they don't know how. So what can we do to help them do how? We don't blame the government. We don't think of, yeah, but because the schools are not doing this and not doing that. Okay, fine. How can we help? And allow me here to go directly to the to go directly to the third part, because this is actually a great kind of connection, which is drum rolls. Anybody has drums in the house? To roll drums? No? Okay. Which brings me to the third element, which is ideate. So everything that we do in design thinking is done for the purpose of coming up with a solution. And coming up with a solution comes from coming up with ideas. So we have empathized. We have dealt with emotionally with the people, with the community we're trying to help. We decided to dig deeper into the 5 whys, paying attention, not to stay too much at the surface, but in the same time, not to go away from the initial community that we're working with. We're almost always going to end up at the political scene, because everything in life is eventually at some point to a certain level political. And the third level, which is ideate. And in ideate here, we understood what the problem is. We want to come up with as many ideas as possible. So if the problem is that the teaching is not as live as it can be, okay, what can we come up with? We can come up with a new curriculum. We can come up with new tools that would make it more lively. We can come up with a teacher training. We can come up with so many different things. We can come up with integration of artificial intelligence or integration of virtual reality. We can come up with new experiential learning processes for each learning material or curriculum, and so on and so forth. So come up with as many ideas as you possibly can. And this is the beauty of ideate. It's not about coming up with one idea. It's about coming up with as many ideas as possible. And this is something that we will not be able to do hands-on here. Sorry for that. It breaks my heart, but we won't be able to do it, because the beauty of it is collective intelligence. The beauty of it is collective wisdom, i.e. when we are 3 or 4 of us in the same room and we're coming up with ideas and we're throwing all these ideas. Now, a very, very important tip when it comes to creating a bowl of ideas is that you never, ever in your life, when ideating, use the word B-U-T, but. B-U-T, 1T, just clarification. Yeah, but no, I don't think it's gonna work. Yeah, it's nice, but it's not in Lebanon. Yeah, it's good, it's interesting, but this particular community won't be reacting with it. There are no buts here. There are no, yeah, that's not gonna work. Not sure about that. When you're doing the ideation phase in design thinking, everything is allowed. The craziest idea. Somebody says we're going to bring a UFO. we're going to put all the teachers in it. We're going to take them to Jupiter and then back. This idea is still valid. Is it viable? No, it's not viable. But at this stage, you're still going to accept it and write it down. The ideas can be silly, can be not so realistic. There are no boundaries at all when it comes to the ideation phase. And this is what beautiful about it, is that it really unleashes the power of creativity. We're no longer constrained by what is feasible and what is doable and what is possible. This will come later on. So here you come up with as many ideas as possible. The sky is actually, no, even the sky is not the limit. Even the sky is not the limit. So instead of saying, but this won't work, you say yes, and. This is kind of a very tiny difference, really tiny tweak. Instead of saying yes, but, you say yes, and. Yes, that's a great idea. And you know what? We could also do this and this and that. That's great. And it would be even greater if we do this and this and that. So by adding instead of removing, rejecting, we are creating a safe space for creative exploration. And creativity functions best when the amygdala is not screaming danger, when we are not afraid of judgment, when we're not afraid of sounding silly. So when all of that fear is put aside, when we know we're not going to be rejected for our silly ideas and crazy thoughts, creativity is much more comfortable to express itself. And this is the most important part. So instead of saying yes, but, we say yes, and. We come up with constantly more ideas, and then some more, and then some more. And usually at this stage, you kind of time it, because otherwise you can come up with ideas for the next 24 hours. You can come up with 3 million ideas, but there has to be a certain limit. And then after that, you kind of either choose one idea that stands out. Probably not the you for putting all the teachers in and sending it to Jupiter and back. It's probably something a bit more feasible. Or you can choose a combination of ideas, because there are 2-3 ideas that really stand out, and that can be combined into one solution that can solve the problem. So ideate. You come up with as many ideas as possible. Even the sky is not the limit. And then you combine the 1, 2, 3 ideas that really you feel as a group, as a collective intelligence, are going to work, are going to function. And once you settle on that one idea that you're going to work on, you move to the next stage, which is prototype. And again, here, for practical reasons, we're not going to do with prototype, but for future reference, the prototype is something that is extremely simple, but it has to function. And I'm going to give you an example of what could or what could not be a prototype. So you have baguette, cheese, tomato, and lettuce. What do you do with it? I'd love to hear your answers. What do you do with a baguette, lettuce, tomato, and perhaps smelly, perhaps not so smelly cheese? It depends on what. If you like smelly cheese, then be it. If you don't like smelly cheese, then the cheese is not smelly. So it's up to you and your taste and what you like. What do you do with these ingredients? Do you do a pizza? Can you? Because if you want to do a pizza, then you would have the lettuce, the tomato, and perhaps a few pieces of cheese. That doesn't make pizza, because the main component is dough, and you don't have the dough. So if you want to prototype some kind of food, and if you have these ingredients, you make a sandwich. The sandwich is your prototype. And you go and ask people if they like cheese sandwich with these kind of ingredients. And then once you have more ingredients, when you bring the dough and you bring the olives and you bring the tomato sauce, couldn't find tomato sauce, and you bring the ananas and the pineapple. So here, yeah, I'm going to be very controversial. I like being controversial. For those of you who like pineapple pizza, the pineapple is for you. For those of you who hate it, well, it's still there. So you get all the additional ingredients that you want, and now you can do the pizza. Now you can cook the pizza. So the prototype is not the final output. It's not the entire phone. It's not the entire website. It's not the entire application. It's not the entire kind of structure. It's something that is much faster to make, but that still makes sense. So if I, for instance, I'm going to create a car, the prototype of the car is not a wheel. The prototype of the car is not a seat. The prototype of a car is in very, let's consider it's a bicycle or a 4-seat bicycle. It has to be something that functions, because what's the function of the car? It gets you from point A to point B. So you want something that gets you from point A to point B. And that is your prototype, no matter how rudimentary it is, no matter how ugly it is, no matter how lame it can be, it still has to be something that functions, that you can show to people and tell them, this is the prototype. How would you interact with it? Do you think it's useful? Yes, it's useful. Why? Because it gets me from point A to point B. And this is how you understand if the idea that you have, the solution that you have, actually has value to the people. And last but not least, after you eat the pizza, because by now you should be incredibly hungry, you do the testing. And the testing is basically going around asking people if it works, if it doesn't work, if they like it, if they don't like it, what do they like about it, what do they hate about it, would they use it, would they buy it? Of course, not in that sense. When you do the test, when you ask people if they would interact with it, you have to be very smart with the choice of questions. Because if you're asking your friend, hey, what do you think with my prototype? Is it nice? They will tell you, yes, of course it's nice, with a smile. But maybe they're not convinced, or maybe they would never ever in their entire life buy it. So you have to be very smart about the type of questions that you ask. So testing is something that is very, very, very important. And once you do the testing, you can, by calling people, by contacting them, by putting things on the ground, by putting your startup idea on Kickstarter to get funded, and perhaps people would buy into the idea, perhaps they won't, by doing surveys. There are a million different ways, perhaps not a million different ways, but there are a lot of ways that you can use in order to test your idea. Through interviews, through surveys, through experiences, actual experiences for the prototype. You can create, if let's say you want to create, escape the room experience. Instead of doing 10 escape the room experiences, you do one and you see how people react to it. And if people react positively, you do the others. Let's say you want to come up with a website that connects, for instance, students with jobs. Instead of starting immediately with building the website, you do something a bit more rudimentary. It could be a WhatsApp group, it could be a Slack channel, it could be a Facebook group where you connect both parties, i.e. the students and the potential employers, the companies, and so on and so forth. So, and you lay out, you put, hey, students, do you wish to be in a group that allows you to be connected to potential employers? Hey, employers, do you wish to be in a group that potentially connects you to interns and or young professionals? And that's how it all starts. Testing requires a lot of social skills because you have to be engaged with the external world and not retracted into your own world. And that is where the social layer comes in once again. So social layer, not just to interact with your team and actually do create something, build something, but also to interact with others and see how that interaction can function and where it can lead. So what we have now is these 5 elements of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. These are 5 steps that you would be able to follow whenever you are working on problem solving, whenever you want to solve a problem for you, for others, for a community. And I believe that if you are in the IoT and an I challenge, obviously it's a challenge. So at some point, I guess you would want to come up with something, use this technique, because it really allows you to channel the right energy towards the right community to tackle the right problem, come up with the right solution, build the right prototype, test it, get insights from it, and then when it's needed, to iterate. Iteration is the process of adjustment in a lean fashion. I think tomorrow you're going to experience the lean methodology, so I'm not going to dig into that. Dr. Muna will be talking about that, and she's brilliant in that regard. So the idea behind it is that once you test, you have data, you have information, and this information would allow you to know what to fix, what to change, and how, and at which point of the process, so that you can build a better product or a better service, i.e. so you can have a better solution. So that was a really quick intro to design thinking. It wasn't a design thinking session for all practical reasons. I hope it wasn't too boring, though. Boring is bad. And this is something that I hope would accompany you in the future, and you would be able to use that. So I strongly recommend that you get creative, that you get a team, individuals who want to solve the same problems and to save the same people, and start building something. AI related, IoT related, VR related, whatever it is related, as long as it's something that makes sense to people and allows them to improve their lives, improve their work, achieve their goals, and so on and so forth. And if you have any question, feel free to reach out to me. That is my email. And feel free to connect. I would love to answer your questions now and later in the future as well. And now I'm going to leave the floor for your questions so that we can discuss them, we can answer them. But before that, I want to make sure with Sarah that we are good on time and that we have a bit of time for a Q&A.
Yes, Alexandra, and as Shant is saying, that was pretty great. Thank you for this session because that was really engaging. I was full ears all the time, and that was really exciting. We still have around 25 minutes. So if someone has any question, please feel free to ask Alexandra.
Yes, please. We have 25 minutes. We can use them all or none of them, but I really think that we're going to use something, because if we have time, then let's use it.
Yes, and some comments are being sent to the chat, Alexandra.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for being here, because obviously this wouldn't have worked if you weren't here and if you weren't part of the process. So thank you for being here and thank you for being engaged. Questions? Maybe, maybe not. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. I love the feedback. That's amazing. Thank you for the feedback. But are there any questions with the feedback? Maybe. It was enjoyable. I hope it was. That's the purpose of it. And education, learning has to be much more fun, engaging, and enjoyable for it to really perform at its possible best, at its absolute best, and for people who are part of the experience to actually enjoy the experience. So yes, thank you for your comment, Walid. Are there any questions? There are no questions. Maybe a more broad question, yes. But there I go. How about the scamper method? Can you further elaborate, Shant? Oh, you're still in the room, so you can elaborate from here. You can actually ask the question live instead of for the chat.
So, hey.
Hey again.
Okay, so the scamper method is actually it's called scamper because it's called substitute, combine, adapt, modify, but then put another, I forgot it. That's what. Put another use to it, eliminate, and reverse or rearrange. That's why it's called scamper. So
that's a big word with a lot of words in it.
Yes. So actually, this is where you're not actually coming up with something completely new, but you're actually taking something that's already implemented and like improving it.
Yeah, so this has a lot to do with process improvement, project management, product management, because at this stage you're not solving a problem from scratch, but you already have something, and what you have in mind is, okay, fine, there's something in that solution that is not functioning at its absolute best. Perhaps I need to remove it. Perhaps I need to put something in its stead. Perhaps I need to refresh it, revamp it. Perhaps I need to fix something in it that is not functioning properly. or something like that. Perhaps it was good. It was an efficient solution like 150 years ago, but now it's no longer an efficient solution. So I have to kind of allow it to make more sense within context. So the methods for kind of problem solving and innovation, there are so many of them. There's design thinking. There's now you talked about the scamper method. Thank you for sharing that. I wasn't familiar with that previously, but the content in the scamper method is very much aligned with the idea of iteration and lean and all of that. There's also lateral thinking that allows you to be more creative. So lateral is for thinking in terms of horizontally instead of vertically. And this is where you don't have a problem to solve. You don't have a product that you want to improve, but you have a situation that you want to be more creative about. You have an experience that you want to be more creative about. So there are all these methods, all these thought processes that exist out there, and they exist for us to be able to do things better, basically. So thank you for sharing that. We have another question from Walid. How do you plan to support the contestants? I think this is, the question is for Sarah, if I'm not mistaken.
I think, no, but to mention, Dr. Walid is one of our organizers. He's the secretary of the IEEE Lebanon section. And yes, he is with us in the Lebanon IoT and AI Challenge. And I guess this he wants to ask you because the session was really enjoyable and beneficial.
Which question?
On how to plan to support the contestants in the upcoming steps in our hackathon and the accelerator program.
Okay, I have no idea. I haven't been told.
Yeah, that's a question.
Oh, yeah, I have zero clue. I have zero clue. So the question for me, I have absolutely no idea how this is going to work. I know Sarah because Sarah is doing some outstanding work when it comes to connecting people and connecting dots. I know that the community here in Lebanon is growing. This is to answer a bit of your question, Donna. There is starting to be a very strong community when it comes to artificial intelligence in Lebanon. I'm referring to Beirut AI, I'm referring to Zeka, I'm referring to some activities that are being made by Fruit Punch AI, but perhaps not in Lebanon outside, but some of activities have been made also in Lebanon. So there is this community of AI that is starting to kind of take shape. Is it as advanced as, I don't know, the community that is in Singapore or in the Netherlands or in the US? Obviously not. But we're not working from scratch. There are already people who are working on artificial intelligence and trying to build a community, to build an infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So so basically, we don't have an official infrastructure for anything, but there are some amazing individuals that, like Sarah, like Christophe Zorbe from Zeka and Beirut AI, who are starting to build the pieces and IoT and AI Challenge. So in Lebanon, obviously, and they're starting to build the pieces that we need in order to move forward in that direction. Now, anything related to the content itself and to how things are going to unfold in terms of competition, contests, and so on and so forth, I really don't think that I'm the best person to answer the question. So sorry, Walid, if I disappointed you in that regard.
I think we can definitely talk about this and discuss it later on. But thank you, Alexandra. And there's a very good comment, a nice comment from Yusuf on the chat.
Yeah, I'm reading it right now. The design approach solve real world problems. Thank you so much for it. Thank you, Yusuf, for the comment. Yes, absolutely. So I love the fact that you added human-centered to the mix. And this is why empathy is the first step. So we're not solving problems mechanically. It's not like there's a missing piece and we're just going to buy it and add it. It doesn't work like that. Design thinking is very human-centered in this very it's anchored. This is where it's anchored in the emotional layer and the social layer. So it's not just about fixing issues. It's not about adding a piece or removing a piece. It's really about understanding what's happening within that individual and around that individual, an individual who is representative of perhaps community, that allows us to really solve a problem, but more importantly, solve a problem that is deeply affecting people and individuals in order to help them improve their lives. So it's very, very human-centered from the beginning, which is empathize, to the end, which is the implementation. Because obviously, design thinking, what you do with design thinking is that eventually you want to implement the solution. Otherwise, it's just an exercise. It's not a real method for problem solving. So yes. Any other questions? Yes, no, maybe.
I think maybe there are no more questions, but I want to just take the time to thank you, Alexandra, again, and thank all the attendees for being here and for being so interactive. Oh, yeah, there are a few comments.
Okay, this is the net lag. So guys, this is a word that I have coined last year. There's the jet lag and there's a net lag. This is a net lag. I really wish we would all be able to experience jet lag again. As annoying as it was felt before, it's something that I think many of us are looking forward to experience again. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being engaged, for being part of this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions and for your comments. I strongly appreciate that. And if you wish to ask another question at another moment in time, again, feel free to connect. I can share my LinkedIn here with you. Feel free to ask at any moment in time. If I can be helpful later on in the process, however I can, again, feel free to reach out, ask a question, bother me, and I will be all ears.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for this. You are always amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks again for all our attendees. And we hope to see you tomorrow in our next 2 sessions and hopefully in the upcoming challenge. Thank you again and again. And have a blessed evening all. Thank you. Bye-bye.